Thank you. Over to you, John.
My name is John. I am a gratefully recovered addict alcoholic. You know, when I was asked to speak here, I was really kind of overwhelmed to being asked. I really was quite overwhelmed. First thing I need to say is thank you to all the convention committee who's actually put this on today. And do you know what? We all get an opportunity to speak to each other about recovery, one addict alcoholic to another today. And if what we've achieved at the end of today is there's one person in this room who's closer into recovery than they are to going out the door at the end of the day, do you know what? We've done our job. And we've done our job. So thank you to the convention committee. And I was really overwhelmed to be asked here, and part of that is an awful lot of my recovery has been around Boscombe and Bournemouth. You know, it's made a real change to me in my recovery, and there's people in this room today that I recognise having sat in meetings with for a number of years, and you know, like, that fact just amazes me, you know. I don't always speak a lot to people, I'm actually quite shy, but thank you all who recognise me, and I recognise you for being part of my recovery. But you know what, for me it's more than that, because there's people in this room have a direct impact on why I'm not only in CA, I'm actually in recovery at all, okay? So I go into treatment, I come out of treatment on a Thursday night and I start my 90 and 90, and on Sunday night I go to a meeting and I hear a guy who's 22 years clean and sober. And what he shares is the only time he's ever struggled in recovery is when he stopped asking another addict alcoholic for help. And I'm a few days out of treatment and I sit there and I just feel it here. I'm helpless and I don't know what to do. And I go to what's become my home group, which is Guildford Monday night. It's a treatment meeting, and I walk into that meeting, and when I get my opportunity to share and get the courage to do it, I just said, you know what, I'm broken and I'm scared and I'm frightened and I don't know what to do and I don't have a plan. Will someone please help and sponsorship me? And there's a guy in this room who actually came forward that night. I asked for sponsorship, 3 people came forward. There's a guy who's since moved out of the area. There's a guy who became my sponsor, who I picked because he lived closest. I don't know if that's a great choice or not. There's a guy in this room who just came forward and said, do you know what, I know how I can get you well. And it was my first experience of CA where someone just had an absolute honest desire to get me well and wanted nothing more from that. And you know, thank you for everything you did for me that night. It's one of the reasons I'm in CA. But you know, my journey through treatment took me a lock-up detox. I had a lock-up detox for 12 days. You know, I came out of that. I then went into a secure set of flats where we're monitored really heavily. But when we're in there, we used to go to meetings. And my first ever meeting of a CA meeting was Thursday Bedford Hospital. And it was a really interesting experience for me, because what I've come to understand about this illness is a really subtle thing, but at times for me recovery is really subtle as well. I can't see it when it's happening and I can't feel it. Now what's interesting is a speaker in this room who actually spoke that night, and what I heard was, and this might be a reflection of what I heard and not what they said, but what I heard was, I heard someone say that they could get up on a morning and they could walk into that 99% of people in society who could get up, clean their teeth, answer the mail and have a job, and could walk out at the end of the day and not be completely overwhelmed by the experience. They could walk out at the end of the day with an absolute sense of self. They could get up, they could walk into that group of 99% of people, come out at the end of the day with a sense of self, not be overwhelmed, and not leave an ever-expanding massive chaos behind them. Because my experience was, I'd create that stuff, and bit by bit by bit, that 99% just shut over, and I was isolated, I was back out again. And kind of like when I was thinking about what to talk about today, it reminded me of watching medieval films when I was a kid. And they used to have those walled medieval cities like you have on Disney films, and like all the people from the fields trump up, and you go through the doors and you say hi to the guards and you get in and it shuts on you at the end of the day, you know. Now what I've said to me is really profound, because I am 12 days a savage chemical detox. I'm a few days outside of that, and my experience of my first CA meeting wasn't how am I going to stop drinking and using. My experience of my first CA meeting was, do you know what, I believe I can do that. I absolutely believe I can live a life like that. Something inside me emotionally had just shifted, and you know, thank you for, you know, I had the privilege of saying thank you to that person last year. You know, that's a profound experience for me. So I'll start to get to the subject matter at hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a journey of some stories, because I always tell stories, and there'll be a time for questions and answers at the end, okay? So just please let me take you through this journey. Now, there's a guy called Earl Hightower who was big in America, and this story was passed to me like he'd said it. I don't know whether he did or whether it was someone else, but I'll just relay it back to you as if it was him. Now, he's going to do a convention. He's in the Florida Keys, and the Florida Keys is the big area where all the harbour is in Florida. And he's up on this high building or this high place, and he's looking down at all of these boats sailing all over the place in the harbour. And he's looking down at them, and he's got to speak in a couple of hours' time, and he says, do you know what? I look at those boats, all sailing in their different ways. And do you know what? It's just like recovery. Because all of those boats sail in all their different ways, but you know, there's one thing that combines them. It's the wind of a 12-step solution. It's the wind of a 12-step solution. And I love that, you know. That's what we are. And kind of what's going to happen today is I'm going to talk about some stuff. Some of it's mine, some of it's probably some of the people in this room. Some of it I've nicked and claimed it's mine, but hey. Like, we're all going to all that's going to happen is I'm going to sail along, and we're all just kind of going to sail along with each other for a while. And that's all that's going to happen. And do you know what? If you don't like what I'm talking about, go sail with someone else. There are plenty of people in this room who have a recovery that's not mine who can help you. And I kind of like all that's going to happen today. So, what I've been asked to talk about is the 12 steps. Now, when I came into recovery, my problem about going to meetings was I could walk up to people and go, it's a simple program of honesty. It's a simple program of action. And I spent the first few months just saying to people, does anyone fancy telling me what that is? Can anyone just tell me what this simple program of action I have to do? It's a simple program of honesty. Can someone just tell me what that is? And so what I'm going to do today is the principle of honesty behind step one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that principle of honesty, I'm going to play through every single one of the steps and just see what falls out. Because in actual fact, from that point of view, when we go through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the foundation of CA, all that book is stories of people who can't see the truth and then discover it. They can't see the truth, then they discover it, then they forget it, then they discover it again. And you have it. You know, and you have it in the Fred the accountant story. I knew from that moment on I had an alcoholic mind. It was revealed to him. In Jim's story, the car salesman, I went to work on a Tuesday morning. I had a few words with the boss. Do you know what? Nothing serious. He's unaware, he's blind to the fact his relapse has happened because he's had a bad argument. He can't see it, needless to say, he goes out and relapses. And my favourite line of the whole book, Bill's story, page 8, Bill's story, I thought of my poor wife. He's only got one person in his life anymore, and it's taken half his story and half his life to think, oh God, I wonder how she feels. It's kind of that revelation that, that honesty gets revealed to us. So what I'm going to do today, I was going to play that subject of honesty all through the steps. I am not suggesting to anyone in this room this is the way you should do the steps, but my experience of recovery is I hit points at times where I can't see things clearly. And you will tell me something, I'll just shift my gaze to that way. And do you know what? I see what I've been looking at from a different angle, and suddenly it's revealed to me. So if all I achieve today is we get some debate and discussion, and one person in this room gets to see a solution to something they haven't seen before, do you know what? We've done our job. So I'll start to talk about how that honesty was brought to me. And as I said, my journey took me through treatment. And I sit down in front of this guy, and he says to me, do you know what's wrong with you? And I'm like, to be honest, I don't. I have absolutely no idea. And he says, you have 3 things wrong with you. This is really simple stuff, I need you to listen. And he says, the first thing that you've got wrong with you is that you've got an allergy in your body. Why is it that when you have a drink, it makes you uneasy to the point you want another one straight away? Why is it that when you take a drug, it makes you uneasy so quickly you want another one straight away, but your friends are sat there absolutely calmly with that? Why is it that alcohol makes you thirsty, but tea doesn't? Do you know what? There's something going on there. He said the reason that is because you've got an allergy in your body. All that happens is you take a drink and a drug, it kicks off an allergy, you get a craving and you just want more. And in your head you'll always have these ideas of what's going to happen and what it's going to feel like, and actually more and more and more as you drink more and more, it never happens. You never get that feeling, and it's the wrong place, it's the wrong day, you're in the wrong mood. I love that one. These are mood altering chemicals. How can you ever be in the wrong mood when you start? It's impossible. And he said, I'll give you an example. Okay, do you have a brother? And I said, yeah, I've got a brother. And he said, okay, you've got a brother. Biologically, you must be quite similar. So let's go back to you starting you with drinking and using. You and your brother's drink and use for a month, okay? You and your brother, you drink and use for a month. At the end of that month, you'll be using more than you did at the start. Is that a fact? And I go, well, yeah. because I'll have a physical resistance will have built up in my body, so of course I'll be taking more. He says, right, you and your brother have a month off. At the end of that month, you start again. On the second day, your brother's hit the pub at 4 o'clock, and he's sat there and he's saying, do you know what, it's lovely to be in the same old chair, looking at all of you lot, and I bet you in the last 28 days, nothing's happened. And someone goes, yeah, Dave's still ugly. And it's kind of like that same old boring bloke pub stuff that goes on. But for you, you already started, you scored the night before, you finished your gear off on the Saturday morning, you've been drinking till 12 o'clock to take the edge off, you bought more gear in the pub, and you're already getting pills on for the evening. Why is it you can go from nothing to an amount of money that would put your brother in hospital in 24 hours? That cannot possibly be a physical resistance. You haven't drunk and used for a month. It's an allergy, and the fact of the matter is, if you drink and use and all that happens is that you get ill and paranoid, do you know what? You are way over that line. You will never get that effect again. It's an allergy, it's gone. That's never going to happen to you. And it's kind of like go back and using. You and your brother get a candle, you drink and use for a month, and the candle burns down. At the end of the month, your brother gets a new candle. You don't. It just burns down and down and down and down and down. And he says to me, what do you think? And I'm like, I've never heard it explained like that. But God, how do you know that stuff? It's like, okay, we'll go on. The second thing you've got wrong with you, you've got an obsession in your mind. And what that means is that when you're drinking and using, you're going to obsess about drinking and using. But you know what? When we take that drinking and using off you, you're really going to see what the kicker is in this illness. Because you'll obsess about anything. And actually, if you go back in your life, you will have always been fixing on something. As a kid, you'll have got obsessed by things, and then in an instant it's gone, and you can't get that feeling back of why that was so important. And maybe you've spent all your pocket money on it, who knows? You'll have always been fixing on something. And it's kind of like you get out and you're clean and sober, and it's kind of like you've got a jar that says drinking, and you've got a jar that says using, and you've got a jar that says eating, and you've got a jar that says gambling, and you've got a jar that says that hobby that you took up and bought all the gear for and paid the subscription for, but you never fucking do. But the problem is, you get a handle on the drinking and the using starts, you get a handle on the using and the gambling starts, you get handling on the gambling, and it just goes on and on and on. And the problem is, you've got 7 jars and you've only got 6 lids. You're always chasing something. And he says, I'll give you an example. You go to work on a Thursday afternoon and you buy the coffee machine, it's 4 o'clock, and this guy called Pete turns up, and just as you're leaving, he says a little comment to you. You go, okay, that's fine. And you think about it just for a few minutes too long, and it just slips under your skin. And you start thinking, do you know what, he keeps doing that to me, it's always 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe I should talk to him next time I see him at the coffee machine tomorrow. And I go home and I start thinking, yeah, a coffee machine would be a good point because there's no one else there. And it just slips in, and I'm thinking about it all night. And meanwhile, Pete's at home watching EastEnders eating pizza with his family. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. I'll see Pete tomorrow. I'm driving to work and I'm thinking about it. 10 o'clock comes. I'm just going to go and get a coffee, go around the coffee machine. Pete's not there. Where's Pete? Maybe he's in his office. I don't need anything from IT, but maybe he's in his office. I go around to his office. Has anyone seen Pete? It's like, no, Pete's on holiday. Like, he said that deliberately, hasn't he? Because he knows I can't say it back today. And we go back round, and then all through that day, I'm thinking about it. I said, you know, now I think about it, he's been doing this for weeks. He's been doing it for weeks. And I think about it more and more and more and more, and it's just digging into me more and more and more. It's in my head all the weekend. Meanwhile, Pete's on holiday with his family. He's got a whole stack of pizzas and he's just watching box sets of EastEnders, I go to work on a Monday morning, Pete, can I get Pete? 10 o'clock Monday morning, go to the coffee pint, is Pete? Pete's not here. I go round to his office, has anyone seen Pete? And they're like, John, you're looking stressed, what's the matter? And Pete's on holiday, we told you that. I'm like, do you know what? It's now 4 days, he said this to me, but he's been doing this to me for months. And I'm absolutely clear what I'm going to do. Tuesday morning, if even Pete's in his office, I'm going to drag him out of his office. It's absolutely got me. So when I go into work on a morning, there's this long corridor, and there's doors off this corridor. And I'd say, right, go and get Pete at 10 o'clock, it'll all be fine. And I walk in, and Pete walks out on my right, he's there. Hi John, how are you? Pete, you've been on holiday. He goes, yeah, I had a fantastic time. Went with the kids. Have you got kids? And I go, 2. And he goes, 2, got to drive on, very busy. Bang, he's into the door opposite me and he's gone. And you know, at that point in time when I've got 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 other things like that happening in my head and in my emotions at any one time, there is only one way I've ever know how to fix my feelings, and that's to drink and use. And you know what? I've got an allergy. When I start, I can't stop, and I'm back into that cycle. I'm back into that cycle. And he says to me, before we go into the spiritual whole bit, I'm going to talk to you some stuff about honesty in a minute, so it's really clear what we understand these words mean, because when the early AA meetings started, that, you know, we used their book, they used to have dictionaries on the table, and it's really important that we know what these words mean. Honesty is a big word. I'm going to talk to you about honesty in a minute. Like, you're in recovery now. I'm now going to teach you the difference between not lying and honesty, okay? I need some new trainers. It's not a lie. I need some new trainers, I'm going to buy those ones. I need some new trainers, I'm going to buy those ones. I can't afford them because my money doesn't come through till Tuesday, and it means I'm not going to be able to eat for a few days, but I am going to buy those ones. I need some new trainers, I like those, I am going to buy them, and they don't even fit me properly, but you know what, I am going to buy those ones. And the reason I'm going to buy those ones is I'm going out on a Saturday night, and I want you to think, when you see me and my trainers, I want you to think that I still rock and roll a bit. Even though I'm on a programme of honesty, I want you to look at my trainers, I'm going to go, well, you know, if you know where to go, you can still get this stuff, and they're not nicked. But the fact of the matter is that night's going to wear on, and you know, it'll just be another night, and I'll still try and talk about my trainers, and someone will do something selfish, like say I'm going on holiday, or my mum's ill, or I've got a partner, or something else is happening, and in the end the night will just turn out exactly the same as it was, and the night will roll on. And the next morning I'll get up and I'll look at them and I'll just pull the cover over my head, because I'll realise I'm hungry and I've got no money till Tuesday, and my feet are sore. And I don't want to open the cupboard and put them on top of the last pair I bought when I did it a few months ago. That's honesty. But you know what? When we're talking about being in recovery, that's not the honesty we're talking about. When someone sits in a meeting and says, I drank and used like you, and I say I did, that's recognising a fact. That's not the honesty we need in recovery. That's not what this is about. It's a different thing. So we go back a while, I'm out there and I'm drinking and using. I'm going to go and see my friend Bubba. I'm going to go and see Bubba because Bubba's got a big flat screen television. So we're going to go around there, we're going to watch some movies, okay? We're going to go around to Bubba's house. As we get round to Bubba's house, we get all the things set up, we're going to watch some movies, and Bubba's got a cupboard beside his television, and beside his television he's got all his gear and all his booze in that cupboard. Okay, so we're just about to watch the film. He opens up the cupboard, he gets his bottle out, he pours some drinks, he gets the gear out, he racks up what he's going to rack up. We do what we have to do. He then takes his gear, wraps it, puts it back in the cupboard. He takes the bottle, puts the cap on, puts the bottle back in the cupboard and shuts the door. Next 2 hours, Bubba watches the film. Next 2 hours, John just stares at the cupboard. Now then, an interesting thing happened there. Because what we had is laughter, an honest and emotional connection between addict alcoholics, two addict alcoholics with an honest emotional connection. And that's what identification and the honesty is we're looking for. Honest emotional connection, one addict alcoholic to another, that's what identification is. It will always pull recovery out of me and me into recovery. And that is all you need. If you're new into this fellowship, that is all you need to make a start, that level of identification. I would say to anyone new in this room into recovery, if you laugh today, it is all you need to make a start. With that, it can pull recovery out of you and you into recovery. And I'll make you this promise that was made to me. Welcome to CA, the home of the 12-step recovery. You never, ever, ever have to drink and use again the rest of your life. And if there's a witness in this room and that promise has come true, please raise your hand and say aye. God bless you all. So, do you understand, John, the difference between honesty and not telling a lie? And I say yes. He said, right. I'm now going to go on to the third part of what this illness is. And the third part of this illness is you've got a spiritual hole. And what that means is you are blind to the consequences of your own behaviour. I'll explain it. You are blind to the consequences of your own behaviour. You do the most appalling things and you hurt yourself. And you hurt other people. And you're blind to it. and you've done it all of your life. You've hurt yourself and you've hurt other people and you're blind to the consequences of what you cause. That's your spiritual hole. And do you know what? Occasionally someone will say to you, John, do you realise what you've just done? Do you realise? And all of your conversations start with a combination of 7 words. Yes, but, I know, it's just that. Yes, but, I know, it's just that. Yeah, but, yeah, it's just that. And you think that suffices? You think that's enough? And the guy says to me, what do you think? And he said, before you even answer, I started talking to you 20 minutes ago and I know where you were sat because I've sat there and I can see the change in you and I know what I've just told you and I know the impact it's had on you because I can feel it. Tell me you feel that. I said, something in me has I just don't know what it is, but something's changed. And he said, that is identification. It's an honest emotional connection, one addict alcoholic to another. It's that will pull recovery out of you and you into recovery. Now then, the kicker of this illness is, in the book that we use, there's a thing called the doctor's opinion, and what the doctor's opinion says is the core of this illness is we cannot tell the truth from the false. We cannot tell the truth from the false. And do you know what? I'll put that in everyday language. What that means is you cannot see your own life honestly. There's always parts of your life you can't see honestly. And because you can't see your life honestly, you can't behave honestly in your life. You will sit and go through you've got to do something big. You'll sit and go through all these different scenarios of what, they'll say that, I'll say this, you'll say that. And when you get there, they always get their lines wrong. Do you know? But the point is that all the people around you talk about this stuff. They're all starting over here because you don't see your life honestly. Your arguments start way over here, and it's not a surprise that you're always proved to be wrong. It's not because you're stupid or you're dumb, it's because you've got an illness. And you just can't see your life honestly. Now then, what I told you about the doctor's opinion was that you'll never be able to see your own life honestly. This book predicts that what I've just done to you, you can do to someone else. And if you were in a better state today, the next addict that walked through that door and sat down, if you repeated exactly what I told you to them, they're probably going to have the same effect. This book predicts if we take people through these steps in a certain way, they will have a change about themselves. And he said, what do you think? And he says, why is it? I've never met you before. I don't know you. I know nothing about your life. But I brought a level of honesty into your life you've never been able to see yourself. Answer me that. And I couldn't. I absolutely couldn't. And he said, I'll say to you again, the core of this illness is you'll never be able to see your own life honestly. But the kicker to all this is another addict alcoholic can. You're always going to be dependent on that emotional connection, that identification with another addict alcoholic. When you cannot see your own life honestly, if you reach out and have that honest emotional connection with another addict alcoholic, they will always, always, always be able to bring a level of honesty into your life you cannot see yourself. Do you accept what this illness is, and do you accept that you're always going to need the connection from something outside of yourself? Do you accept you will always need the connection of something outside of yourself when you're struggling? Because if you do accept that, do you know what? There is a solution. You can get well. And we can take you through some steps that will increase that honesty in your life. And if you want that, there's people out there can help. Do you accept that you will always need a connection outside of your help, and it's going to be the core of what you need to do? And I say yes. Do you know what? I want it more than anything I've ever wanted in my life. And the guy says to me, do you know what, that's your steps 1, 2 and 3 done. This is only today what I'm talking about is what we need to make a start. I understand what my illness is. I know I'm powerless over it. I know about the allergy. I know about the obsession. I know I'm never going to be able to see my own life honestly, and I will always have to have a dependence on something outside of myself. In its simplest form, that is steps 1, 2 and 3 done. So do you know what? That brings us to step 4. What I said was I am going to put this in everyday language today. And all I'm going to do is talk about some stuff that if it causes people to have a discussion, that's absolutely fine. So let's talk about step 4. So what I'm going to talk about now is an experience and a process I took a guy through. I'm not going to mention him, and I'm not going to mention his name, but I'm going to take you through the process of what we actually did together, okay? So, I'm working with this guy, and He's kind of rocked and rolled a bit. He really, really has rocked and rolled a bit. And I take him to a shopping centre on a Sunday afternoon. So we go off to this shopping centre on a Sunday afternoon and we walk around this shopping centre. And as we're going round, he's pointing out all of these different places, like where he's nicked stuff. And I let him do all this stuff, and we actually walk away from that, and we actually walk outside, and we go and sit down in a car park on this wall. And I said, when we're in that shop, there's a young girl I talked about, and I pointed her out. Do you remember? And he says, yes, I do. I remember that. I said, I want you to think of someone who's like her, okay? I want you to think of someone who's like her. And I'm going to tell you a story. It's not true, but what I'm going to do is tell you a story about someone like her, and I want you to think what it's like. So, this is a small town. She comes from a family with quite a heavy reputation. Her brothers and her father, and their uncles tended to get what they wanted, and everyone knows this family. And she's never really had to try for much, and people are quite scared of her and her family, so she never did much at school. The problem is her father and her brothers and her uncles are now in prison. Okay? They're in prison. And she's left with this problem that she has to get money for her mum, who's not very well, and look after a couple of brothers. She has to do that. And the problem is that every time she goes for an interview, no one will give her a job. And eventually that store there says, yeah, we'll give you a job. And so they give her a trial and they do some training. You know what? She's not the greatest, but you know what? She has this absolute willingness that this is what she wants to do. And so in the end, they give her a job. On the Tuesday of her first week, you go into that shop and you nick loads and loads of stuff. You just nick it all. And at the end of that first week, that shop knows two things. Firstly, she started and they knew she might be difficult. And secondly, a whole load of stuff's been nicked. And rightly or wrongly, they put those two things together, and that girl loses her job, and she's now back out there trying with no money, trying to fend for a mum. And the guy says to me, I never thought of it like that. You know, I always thought that I was just nicking from shops. I said, well, you're not. When you talk about consequences, don't shortcut it anymore. Take it to the next place. There is always a human consequences at the end of what we talk about consequences. Always take it to the point at the end of what we're talking about consequences. Now, what I'm doing with this guy is I'm taking through this process, because the process of step 4 from the perspective of honesty, what we're looking for is an absolute point of revelation, you know. I always had absolutely great intentions in my life, but my behaviour was well over here. And what I've learned in my step 1, 2 and 3 is I've always had an illness I've been blind to the consequences of. And the purpose of step 4 from the point of view of honesty is for me to get an absolute clear sight of what my illness has done in my life, and I've not been aware of it. And what I'm really looking for in this step 4 process I'm taking through this guy is it's kind of like a sheet of paper or a cloth, and I'm just looking for that tear at the top. It goes, and it splits John from John's illness. Because from step 4, from the point of view of honesty, what I'm looking for is an absolute point of revelation where in an instant he goes, Christ, I've never realised what this illness has done to me. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing him to this point where I can absolutely start to get that revelation to happen. So I'll take him through that step with what I've just talked about with that girl, imaginary girl, imaginary stories. We now go across the car park and we're sat in front of the law courts, okay? So we're sat in front of these law courts, and I said, okay, what we're going to do now is that we're going to come up with a sum of money that you've probably cost. We're going to go through your prison time. We're going to go through your probation officer's time. We're going to go through solicitor's time. We're going to go through your victim solicitor's time. We're going to go through all the counselling you've had. We'll go through the counselling that they've had. We'll go through all the times you lied about wanting to do treatment and go back in. We're going to come up with a figure of money that you've cost. That's what we're going to do. Are you okay with that? He says, yeah, I am. And so we sit down, you know, we work out this sum of money. And it's colossal. You know, you're talking about a sum of money you could probably build part of a hospital with, a ward. It's a massive, massive, massive amount of money. And I say to this guy, are you happy with that figure? Because it's not accurate, but are you happy with it? He says, yeah, well, that seems about right. And interestingly, that's how he approached me about it. Kind of like, it's a kind of a bit of a smile about it and a swagger, you know, he's proud. There's still that element where he's proud. And I say, okay, this amount of money, it's a lot of money, okay? Do you think it's possible there's a family alive today who could have had just 10 minutes more with a loved one if this money had been spent on healthcare? Do you think it's possible if all of this money had been spent on healthcare, there's a family alive today could have had just 10 minutes more with a loved one who was seriously ill? And do you know what? I didn't get an answer to that. You know, like, to be fair, I don't think there is one. You know? But I didn't get an answer to that. Anyway, we kind of wrap up and we're going to drive off and we're going to go to a meeting. So we're going off to this meeting. And the guy's playing on his phone in the car. And he's on his phone in the car and he says to me, do you know so-and-so? And it's this lady that we both know. And I said, yeah. He said, she's put a picture of herself on Facebook and I've just told her on Facebook she looks ugly. And I'm like, what? He says, there's a picture of so-and-so, she's just put it on Facebook and she told me, I've just told her she looks ugly. I'm like, well, I know her, only through the rooms, but I know her, and I know she is incredibly sensitive about how she looks and how she comes across to people. And I know that she's incredibly proud of what she's achieved in recovery. And do you know what? There's a group of women around her who support her, who are incredibly proud of what she's achieved in recovery. And I don't know, but I suspect I'm right. That's not the first picture she's taken of herself. And I don't know, but I suspect that's not the first room. And I don't know, and I suspect it's not the first hairstyle. And I don't know, but I suspect it's not the first set of makeup or from the first angle. I suspect that's taken her weeks to get to that point. Weeks. And do you know what? You haven't even given her 5 minutes. What do you think that feels like? And it happened in front of me. That absolute horror, hopeless and remorse and the look on the guy's face. And he absolutely had absolutely no doubt what this illness was or what it did to him. And I could almost hear that tear happen in front of me. He absolutely knew and was grounded about what this illness is in him. And that revelation, that absolute thing happened right in front of me. And do you know, he made his amends to that girl and that lady involved. All she said back was, do you know what, you hurt me. And, you know, for me, it's an absolute lesson to have someone who has that grace and humility can come back and, you know, accept an amends in that way. But with that guy, that tear, that absolute thing, it just happened in front of me. And at that point in time, I kind of walk forward and I say, tell me about your brother, tell me about your mother, tell me about every other person you've blamed in your life. Tell me about the people at school, tell me about the police, tell me about your probation officers. And I just walk into that space and bit by bit saying it was never how I've seen it. It was never just them. It was me, it was me, it was me, it was me, it was me. And you know, once that revelation's hit, and I've got that, I've spent 2 hours with somebody, and other times I've spent 20 minutes, because once that thing is hit and it's grounded and it's pushed there, I just say, make that list. We're going to stop today, make that list of people, and when we meet next time, we're going to go through all that stuff in a lot more detail, because at that point in time, if they want to take their recovery forward, it's up to them. I am powerless over that. But you know what? That step 4 process, what it proves is that when it happened to me, I was sat with another addict alcoholic who gave me an emotional connection, that identification, that honest emotional connection with another addict alcoholic. And what they did in my step 4 was bring yet another level of honesty into my life. I was utterly incapable of seeing myself. And for me, step 4 is about a revelation. I absolutely see what this illness has done in my life. And that's what that process is about. And you know what? For today, that's step 4 done. I'm only talking through these things from a perspective of honesty and that absolute essential link. One addict alcoholic talking to another addict alcoholic. That's all I'm going through to that perspective. And if it causes discussion, great. Now then, steps 5, 6 and 7. Now for me, 5, 6 and 7 are absolutely where recovery happens. kind of like there was a process for me between step 1 and step 7 where actually I did all the work on me. In step 7 onwards, I'm out in the world practicing it on others. And I've done my steps 1, 2 and 3. I know I have what my illness is. I know what it's done to me. It's absolutely another addict alcoholic show me what that is. I sit and do my step 4. Another addict alcoholic with that honest emotional connection has brought me an absolute another level of honesty into my life in my step 4. The problem I have now is I'm sat there at the edge of my step 4 looking over this cliff and I'm thinking, how do I live a life day to day and stop that step 4 happening again? Can someone please just give me an honest program of simple action I can do each day? And steps 5, 6 and 7 for me at that point in time where the book talks about at the end of my step 7, I have to be armed with the facts about myself. And for me, 5, 6 and 7 is about that absolute process of me learning how I have to live on a day-to-day basis. Now then, here we go. So, I do my step 4 and start my step 5, and coming out of the back of all that stuff, I have this list of things, and the first thing on my list is that when I'm really scared, I show anger. Okay, and the second thing on my list is that when the stepkids were younger, and I'd made a commitment to take them and actually show them love and compassion the whole time. If I can't be bothered, I used to just say, do you know what, I'm your parent, just do it. And I get selfish and I'd just show them intolerance, regardless of the commitment I'd made around them, which I knew I should do. I'd just play the intolerance card. And the third thing on my list is that when my partner's life is going a bit well and she's going out a lot, do you know what? I get this little insecurity kicks inside of me. So what I do is that I start doing lots of things for her. I start being really over-helpful and doing lots and lots of things for her, because I know at some point she's going to turn around and go, John, stop smothering me. Just stop doing that stuff. You do not have to do so much for me. At which point I go, God, I just, now you notice. I do all of these things all the time. I absolutely work my fingers to the bone, and I do all this, and now you notice I'm doing this stuff. God, I'm so underappreciated, at which point I've kind of used that guilt and I've wrested some control back into my relationship. And do you know what? I've got 97 other things on that list. Now my question is, when I'm scared and I show anger, does that make being scared and anger character defects? And when the kids want my love and then, all of my love and affection, and I just play the intolerant, I get selfish and I throw the intolerance card down, does that make selfishness, intolerance, does that make them character defects? Or when I want to wrest control back in my relationship because insecurities happen, so I play the guilt and the control and the self-pity cards, does that make all of them character defects? And my answer to that is, you've just pointed out like 7 things, and we've only got to the third one. I've got a list of another 97 things. I'm absolutely rattling. I couldn't clean my teeth when I came into recovery. Whether they're character defects or not, are you seriously suggesting to me I now have to try and monitor 200 to 300 things about myself every fucking day? It is kind of as pointless as asking an addict and alcoholic who's just come into here, who's restless, irritable and discontent, to write a 20,000 word step 4. But hey, do you know, these things are just not going to happen. I cannot, if you explain to character defects to me in that way, I can't manage that. There's nothing I can do with it. But the book is really, really clear, and I'm going to use this phrase 3 or 4 times, because what the book says is, let's look at that list from an entirely different angle, okay? So, when I'm scared and I show anger, I'm just being emotionally dishonest. I'm just being dishonest. I'm being emotionally dishonest. And when I have made that commitment to my kids to give love and affection at all times, and they're asking for something really simple, and I'm feeling just thinking, no, bollocks to you, and I just play the intolerance card, even though I should be doing that. I know what I should do, but I do this. I'm just being emotionally dishonest. I'm just being dishonest, that's all it is. And when my partner's life's going great, and I get insecure and I throw the self-pity card down and pull on that guilt and wrest some control back, do I want my partner to be unhappy? No, that's not the deal. It's not what I committed to. Will me behaving like that make her unhappy? Yes, I am just being emotionally dishonest. I am just being dishonest. And do you know what? When I look at every single thing that I've been taught was a character defect on that list, every single one of those, at the root of them is me being emotionally dishonest, me just being dishonest. But that shouldn't be a surprise, because step 7 says we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Now, I said earlier on, the early AA meetings had dictionaries on the table. The root of the word humbleness and humility means to honestly know and accept ourselves. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So the aim of step 7 is to be humble, to honestly know and accept ourselves. The only shortcoming can be something that stops me being honest. And step 7, from the point of view of honesty, is an absolute, total and utter commitment to live with absolute honesty. Step 7 is about a commitment to live honestly. Step 7 is a commitment to live absolutely emotionally honesty. And that's what step 7 is actually about. So underneath character defect, being dishonesty shouldn't be a surprise. But do you know what? Step 4 says, let's look at that list from an entirely different angle. So let's look at the list from an entirely different angle. So, when I'm feeling scared and I play the anger card, I give myself permission to be dishonest. When I feel that insecurity because my missus is becoming a bit too popular and I play those self-pity cards and things like that, as soon as I play the self-pity card down, I have given myself permission to be dishonest. And do you know what? When the kids want that love and attention, I can't be bothered, and I just play the intolerance card. I absolutely give myself permission to be dishonest. And what that list is 100 things that happen where I give myself permission to be dishonest. John, it's kind of like, do you know what, John? You're kind of a funny guy to get on with, you know that. And I like you, don't get me wrong, but you're kind of you're a difficult guy to get on with. Really? I'm surprised you say that. The thing is, John, it's like, I never quite know how you're going to react, you know? It's kind of like you get really occupied by these things in your head and you drive with them for weeks, and at times, you know what, I've even read up on the things you're interested in and I mention them to you and you just go, what are you talking about that for? It's really dull. And I can never quite judge how you're going to react. That's because I have a list of things that give me permission to be dishonest to you. You got what? You've got a list of things that give yourself permission to be dishonest to me. Can I see the list? Well, no. See, the difficulty is that I'm never quite sure of the priorities, and the priorities tend to change quite a lot, and it's, they absolutely just tend to move around quite a lot, so I'm not sure you'd understand them. What? It's just difficult for me too, you know, it's not easy. And you know, I come into recovery and I wonder why my relationships have failed, and my relationship with my family have failed, and I don't have any friends, and even dogs don't like me. Do you know what step 4 says? Step 4 says, let's look at that list from an entirely different angle. And this is where we really start getting down to causes and conditions, because when I'm scared and I play the anger card, I connect to something that changes how I feel and it changes how I behave. And when the kids are doing all of that stuff and I play the intolerance card because my head's just going, do you know what? I connect to something that changes how I feel and how I behave. And when my wife's having that great life and I absolutely play that self-pity card and go through that process because I'm getting really insecure, instantly I connect to something that changes how I feel and changes how I behave. You know, when I look at that list of things, I've got 100 examples on that piece of paper of examples of things where I connect to something that changed how I feel and how I behave. Here's the kicker. I don't know what anyone else's definition of a higher power is, but connecting to something that changes how I feel and how I behave is as pretty damn close as I've ever heard. problem I've got with it is every single one of those examples drive me to be dishonest. And if my step 7 commitment is about living a life about emotional honesty, kind of in my mind, it doesn't really matter what your higher power is going to be, but it has to be something that reminds you or takes you to a place where it absolutely reminds you that you have to live a life of emotional honesty. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to bring that connection back that will always drive you towards a situation of emotional honesty. And you know, when I work with people who come into this who say, do you know what, I'm having a bit of a struggle with the higher power stuff. All I do is I sit down with them and I go through the process I've just talked about, and I take them through that permissions process, and I show them all those examples. You connect to something every single day of your life that changes how you feel and how you feel. What do you think that's about? What do you think that is? Do you know, and with that, I can make a start with somebody. And kind of that's 5, 6 and 7 done. I should leave it there. Step 8 and 9. I will just go back to the end of step 7. At the end of step 7, I have to have a process where I know how to live each day. The rules are pretty clear. I have to live with an absolute emotional honesty. And when I can't see that, I seek another addict alcoholic, because what my step 1 and 3 told me is that when I can't see things clearly myself, another addict alcoholic has proved they can bring an honesty into my life I can't see myself. So any time my simple process of living each day, my simple plan of action is, if I'm uncomfortable or struggling, step back, seek the emotional honesty, ask for advice from another addict alcoholic and move forward. And with that, do you know what? I can do recovery. I'm not saying it's everything you need to do, but do you know what? We're talking about basics. Anyway, steps 8 and 9, interesting ones. 1, 2 and 3, I've learnt what this illness is. I know I can only get sight of my illness through another addict alcoholic. I will not always be able to see it myself. Step 4 is revealed to me what this illness has done to me. Steps 5, 6 and 7, I have a way I can live my life honestly. I can now stand in front of you and I can apologise because I know what I've done, why I did it, what I have to do tomorrow. I can stand in front of you with an absolute emotional honesty and say, do you know what? I can give you every single thing where you can choose to clear off the wreckage of your past with me, because I have no effect of whether you will or will not forgive me. But I can sincerely offer everything to you for you to clear the wreckage of your past. And when we did that step 4 thing where the sheep tore, and all of those consequences I use as the basis to take forward in that side of it. The other side of it is that I'm left with John. John has a right to a life. He's done his program. He's done his work. Do you know what? I have, through that 8-9 process where I've done everything honestly I possibly can, I have the right to forgive myself. I have the right to clear away the wreckage of my past. It wasn't until I offered and accepted my own forgiveness I was truly able to grow in my sobriety. And I go out and I want that experience and I do my 8 and 9. Step 10, interesting one, because if you ever see me struggle in recovery, please don't come up and tell me to get on my knees. Please don't come up and tell me I need to get a God in my life. Please don't come up and tell me have I thought about doing inventory. Because if I'm struggling, I'm already in a position I can't see stuff myself. My experience is, when I start to struggle, it's because I'm being dishonest and I don't know it. People around me are being dishonest and I don't know it. Or I'm in a situation that's dishonest and I can't see it. So, if you ever see me struggling, please walk over and say, John, don't forget what you learned in your 1, 2 and 3. Another addict alcoholic, you need another addict alcoholic to have that honest emotional connection with, that identification. They can bring a level of honesty into your life you cannot see yourself. That is always going to be the same. It doesn't matter what your commitment was at step 7 to live. You can try and live as honestly as you want. You will always, always, always reach points in your recovery where you cannot see your own life honestly. You have to sit down with another addict alcoholic, get that honest emotional connection, that identification. It will pull recovery back out of you and you into recovery. Let me sit down with you and go through that stuff. Rock and roll. Let me sit down with you and go through that stuff, because with that I have a step 10 that's of value. Me writing inventory on my own and never sharing it is not going to take me anywhere. If I'm struggling, I'm already in a position where I don't know what it is. I need to share that with another addict alcoholic. And from the perspective of honesty, step 10 is a commitment to service. Because when I look at that unity, service, recovery triangle, we're all here for a 12-step reason. But actually what unifies with me and you other people is that for to survive, I need that honest emotional connection. I need that identification with another addict alcoholic. That's what unifies me and you. Recovery. What I need for my recovery is that honest identification, that honest emotional connection, one addict alcoholic to another. The other side of that triangle, service. I absolutely commit to do that every single day. Every single day I will have that honest emotional connection and discuss my recovery with an addict alcoholic, because what I'll discover in me and what you discover in you will keep us clean and sober. And to me, from the perspective of honesty, step 10 is about a commitment to service. Do your inventory, do all those stuff in whichever way you want, but when you get to a point where you're struggling, reach out. Connect to another addict alcoholic. They will always bring a level of honesty to your life you cannot see yourself. Starting to wind it down now. Step 11, sort through prayer and meditation. Do you know what? How you do it, what you want to do, how you connect is entirely your affair. But what this process would direct you towards is whatever you want to connect to has to be something that reminds you that you live a life of emotional honesty. It always has to guide you back to that path. But do you know what? Find it in your own way and do your own thing. But step 11 has to be that ultimately you have to get driven back to a point where you're always connected back to trying to live an honest emotional life. An honest life and the honest emotional life. The only thing I'll add to that is, on a personal level, there's a Japanese proverb that I really, really love. And what it says is that they will laugh at you whether you dance or not. So you may as well dance. Do you know, if recovery is not about living life and loving and dancing and swearing and, all that stuff and just enjoying life, I'm not sure what we're here for. Get out and dance, Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. There's a whole chapter in the book about that, chapter 7. And if you've been going through the steps, and do you know what, you got a bit tired, and you're not sure whether you've got enough energy left to read that chapter, do you know what? Just read the title. Just read the title. Working with others. Don't read the chapter, just read the title, Working with Others. Seek an honest emotional connection, that honest connection, that identification with another addict alcoholic. Talk about your recovery, share what's going on for you, talk about solutions, get your community together, share that stuff, build your fellowship circle around you. Because do you know what? The book I read said 57 times that I have to be willing, and the book I read said 31 times I have to have willingness, and the book I read said 43 times I have to, this is about a program of action, and the book I read said 127 times that the only way I can ensure my permanent sobriety is by working with another addict alcoholic and getting that identification. So the book I read said 268 times that I have to be willing and it's action, and I have to seek that connection. If the book you read said easy does it, do you know what? It's a phrase that's mentioned once into the family afterwards, which is a chapter about how we manage ourselves around non-addicts alcoholics and not how I work on myself as an addict alcoholic. If that's what the book that you read said, do you know what? That is entirely your affair. But you know what? It's not mine. It absolutely is not mine. And do you know what? We've kind of reached that point now where we need to sail our different ways. I'm kind of through what I thought I should be talking about, and we kind of can just start to sail off where we sail off to. Reaching out. I made it into this program because someone else worked their 12-step on me. Someone passed it on to me. Someone was out there after they got clean and sober, caring about others. And I need to never ever forget that. Had they simply gone with their lives and forgotten about people like me, who are still out there using and suffering, do you know what? I wouldn't be here today. My gratitude begins with that fact, and it's with that gratitude in mind that I reach out to others, especially the newcomer. I need to have them in my life. That is where my spirituality begins. And for me, spirituality comes from caring about others. I found that the more I focus on improving the quality of lives of others, the less I'm into myself and my will. And I do feel that freedom and peace from within. And the gifts I'm beginning to receive in my life are greater than I ever could have imagined. And something else I've done is that I've forgiven myself. I've forgiven myself for being an addict. And I've forgiven myself for all the damage I did to my life. But most of all, I've forgiven myself for all of the horrible, negative and unloving things I felt about myself. Because it was not until I offered and accepted my own forgiveness that I was truly able to grow my sobriety. I'll end where I always end. Thank you for letting me speak today. The first promise that the big book makes is that this is a story of hundreds of men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And my name is John, and I am a gratefully recovered alcoholic addict. Thank you.